Robots. A term that has plagued society since Arnold Schwarzenegger showed up in a dive bar naked in 1984 asking for John Connor. We all have our favorite mechanical robotic adaptations in popular culture or film. I, Robot, The Terminator, or even Disney's hit classic Smart House. Yet, one question remains: where did this all come from? How did we get here? Well, let's delve into the history of job automation, or furthermore, robots themselves. Now, fortunately, we don't live in the world of Skynet. T-800s aren't going to be coming back in time to kill little children that'll eventually one day lead the resistance against machines. But unfortunately, we do live in a timeline in which robots and artificial intelligence do pose threats. Maybe not with giant metal arms that are going to crush our heads in, but rather replacing us for more cost-effective and efficient measures of capitalism. Once requiring a space as large as the room that I'm recording this in, we can now carry fully functional robotic servants in our front pocket. And in fact, the very definition of robot is an interesting one. It comes to us from a Czech play in the 1920s, wherein it was applied to a character as an artificial automata. It's an adaptation of the Czech word robota, which translates roughly to forced laborer. Early robots were nothing more than a set of gears and machinery set to perform a task, somewhat like a toy. In fact, Da Vinci added his name to a robot, a set of gears and mechanisms inside a plate of armor, one of the first automatas that we've ever seen. That is until the 1940s, wherein British scientist William Gray Walter created the first autonomous robot. Just 20 years later, American inventor George Devol created the Unimate, the first industrial robot to hit factories. This marked the beginning of the end of what we call blue-collar jobs. And it's been under our noses the entire time. General Motors purchased several Unimates in the 1960s, which inspired them to think even bigger. The Unimate simply could not keep up with the heavy tasks that car manufacturing required. Thus, under the request of GM, the Puma was invented, or the Programmable Universal Machine for Assembly. For the first time in the industrial era, no longer were Americans in overalls manning assembly lines, but rather steel programmable arms twisting and churning, mass-producing cars faster than humans ever could. Drunk with increased revenues due to higher production quotas and a lack of payroll, many companies decided to lay off more workers, especially in times of economic hardships. If something can be produced by machines, you bet they already are. Food, cars, tools, guns, computer parts, clothes, but it doesn't stop there. Robots have entered the service industry. A terrifying thought. As I open this video, no longer does a bar need to hire bartenders. No more do you need to speak to a cashier at your favorite fast food joint or grocery store. In fact, you don't even need to hire chefs anymore. In San Francisco, for example, burgers are made by programmable robots, not humans. Why? Because the standard cost of living for a human in San Francisco has risen so much that no longer can restaurants afford to employ chefs, busboys, waiters. Instead, they'll just make a one-time investment of a robot and pay the cost if it ever breaks down. Now, artificial intelligence and automation have created great positives to our society. There is no doubt. Goods are relatively cheaper and more available due to the mass production of them. Robots are the natural evolution of humanity. I'm not claiming that technological advancements are necessarily evil. Yet, as we continue to make breakthroughs in robotics, we are going to replace more and more American jobs. When man invented fire, we used it to light up the dark and protect ourselves, yet we also used it to burn down villages. In the 1970s to the early 2000s, job automation was primarily in the factories. Now, it's everywhere you meet people face to face. The service industry is going to be decimated by automation, and this should terrify you. Why? Because 80% of the American GDP is built on the back of industry workers. I'm usually a pretty optimistic guy. However, some facts by the World Economic Forum have me a bit pessimistic. By 2025, just a couple years away, the WEF is projecting that 75 million jobs across the world will be gone due to manufacturing robots and job automation. Now, this is primarily in the labor manufacturing sector, yet bleeds into the service industry as well. 75 million jobs will be gone. Now, yes, these are mainly low-skill jobs, labor jobs, sure, jobs that people just don't genuinely want. But that doesn't make up for the fact that there are 75 million jobs gone. I mean, a bright spot is that automation and AI, yes, will eventually create jobs that right now we can't even think of. 30 years ago, no one thought that industries such as BuzzFeed would exist, yet they do today. So we can't sit here and necessarily say that it's all over, as we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. But we do know for certain that up to 75 million jobs will be gone. 75 million people around the world unemployed. Taking that out of context in the American situation is even worse. In countries where labor and manufacturing are necessary, we're a pre-industrial country. We've been there, we've done that. But there are still countries who are feeling the pains of an industrial growth. So by having to compete with robots, what are they going to do? In 2025, a high school summer job at McDonald's will be impossible because they won't exist. What's even more of a pressing issue is the over 40-year-old individuals who have been carrying cargo across the United States for their entire lives, or the individuals who are played a wrong hand and their service job is all they have. It's not like they can just pop back into a classroom. I'm sorry, but you can't teach a 40-year-old how to code when they have absolutely no want to. Why are we forcing individuals into a set path? Why must everyone learn STEM fields? This is completely against the capitalist idea of specialization. Individuals are good at certain things compared to others, and by forcing everyone to #learn to code, you're neglecting the needs and wants of 80% of our country. Just look at what the United States Postal Service did, signing a contract to begin interstate transit with self-driving trucks. According to All Trucking USA, there are 3.5 million truck drivers in the United States. That's 1% of the American population, all with their jobs in jeopardy. But I'm sure throwing them into a classroom to learn how to code the very things that replace them will work over well. I mean, right? I'm sure that these individuals aren't going to pull their trucks on interstates, block the flow of traffic, in protest to them losing their jobs because a company doesn't want to pay them. I understand the United States Postal Service is low on cash, but by completely neglecting, as a government organization, neglecting the wills and the wants of the people, there's something loud that needs to be spoken there. And I'm sorry, but if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm an accountant, or I'm a back office employee at a bank, I'm fine. You're wrong, and I'm sorry. But why wouldn't your firm or bank buy a software that does your job quicker and is marginally more cost effective? You're a business student. I mean, it sounds like the right move to make, right? But is it ethically the right thing to do? I think the answer is pretty obvious. And it's no. Oh, doom and gloom, we're all going to lose our jobs by 2025. It's all over. Might as well bury our heads in the sand, right? Well, no, not necessarily. That's not what I'd want to happen, and that's not what I'm arguing. So, I mean, what do we do? Well, the only presidential candidate that's even acknowledged the issue is Andrew Yang, a CEO of himself and a capitalist himself. In fact, he wrote a great book about it, how job automation is impacting industries across the United States. Now, this video is not an endorsement for him, even though I do prefer his policies. I recommend you watch some of his videos on automation and why we should care. We consider the inevitable, that this is the path and this is what's going to happen. Now, some individuals have the belief that singularity is near. An individual by the name of Raymond Kurzweil basically argues for transhumanism, which is the idea that machine intelligence is immensely more powerful than we could be, so we have to integrate ourselves with the machines, or bioengineer the perfect human through the advancement of technology. Now, that could be the inevitable, that the singularity is indeed near. On the flip side, you have individuals such as Elon Musk who reject that notion and basically think that it's all over. That AI, once they gain sentience, will never have a singularity with humans and will indeed go ahead and take that Skynet route and will ultimately be the end of ourselves as a species. So it depends on the way you see the glass at the end of the day. We can also write letters to our congressmen and women. We write them to CEOs. We take to the streets and we let companies know that we need these jobs, that not everyone can code, that we are humans, life and soul, and cannot be replaced by machines. I also like to propose an alternative, that we study the arts and government. We bring back what's exactly human about humanity, the ability to create. Yes, we created these machines. Yes, bright, brilliant people in the past have brought us to where we are today. And we have the next 5 years to figure out our path with these machines. Again, I'm not all pessimistic, and these numbers are pretty dark and gloomy, don't get me wrong. Yet, there's so much that we can learn from advancement of technology. There's so much that we can do for our species through this technology. But by replacing all of these jobs with them immediately, there are going to be definite growing pains. There are going to be riots. There's going to be violence. And that can all be avoided. We just have to understand what's coming, and we have to understand how to stop it. No, we don't need to send a robot back to the 1980s to make sure it doesn't happen. All we have to do is exercise our democratic right. At the end of the day, it's guaranteed to us in the Constitution. And it seems it's all we have left.